Introducing Thai Singapore Huddle Sessions.
Hi everyone, my name is Siddhi Dheer and I serve as the Executive Director for Thai Singapore. Welcome to this month's Huddle, which is on corporate innovation, building and growing new ventures. We would broadly cover how the corporates are now looking to radically accelerate innovation through VC programs and how SMEs and startups can charter new conversations and take cover from corporates in these disruptive times. This Huddle is in collaboration with MAC49. MAC49 is a growth incubator. They work with large corporates to build pipelines and portfolios of new ventures to drive substantial growth. Our moderator for the session is Atifa Asgar. Atifa is the head of global customer engagement at Nokia. Atifa has more than 22 years of work experience in marketing, communication sales, customer services across various geographies. She works closely with the events team in brand and Marcoms, as well as the region's lead in field marketing and marketing campaigns team. Prior to that, she was working at the head of field marketing Asia Pacific and Japan region. Before I hand it over to Atifa to introduce the speakers and to take the session forward, a few housekeeping rules. First would be that this session would be shared with all post the session. And to ask any of your questions, please use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. We would discourage typing your questions in the chat box. And lastly, there is a possibility that there might be connectivity issues in this new world. So if any unwanted background music happens, please bear with us. Over to you, Atifa.
Thank you, Siddhi. Thank you for that very gracious introduction, and welcome everyone to this Huddle session. It's my pleasure to be your moderator today, and it's also my pleasure to introduce the two speakers that we have with us. The first one is Steve McGrath. Steve is the Managing Director of MAC49 Asia. MAC49, as Siddhi said, helps global 1,000 companies grow by developing a pipeline and portfolio of new ventures that disrupt both inside out and outside in. Steve has been a private equity investor and venture builder in Silicon Valley and Asia for over 25 years with deep experience in early stage and cross-border VC programs. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. And hello, everybody.
Yeah. Our second speaker is Dr. Andrew Seth. Andrew is at the moment either a CXO or a co-founder of 5 different business ventures, including Search 365 and RoboBuy. With 25 years of practical management experience across multiple industries and markets, Andrew believes in bringing value to enterprises through various business management and innovation strategies. Welcome, Andrew, and I'm good to see that you've finally sorted out your technical issues.
Yeah, I'm very current with today's modern day with connectivity. Sorry for that. And thank you very much for the introduction.
Yeah, but good to have you, both of you. Okay, I'm very mindful of the time that we have as well, so I'm just going to jump right into the conversations that we're supposed to have. So, Steve, I'm going to pose the first question to you, that in these interesting COVID-19 times, how are the corporates now looking to radically accelerate innovation through their VC programs?
Well, thank you, Tifa. That's obviously a very timely question. To answer that question, I really want to come at it in 2 or 3 different ways, and hopefully stitch a response together. I'd like to talk, first of all, about what specifically is the challenge that corporates face, then what we're beginning to see by way of a response from corporates globally, what those corporates want from startups as part of that response, and then what some of the principles and models that are emerging around the world. So in terms of, first of all, the challenge, it's probably pretty obvious, right? COVID-19 has essentially caused systematic disruption on a global scale, and this affects companies in every industry and every geography. And what's most significant about this particular type of disruption is that it's exposed some very new and very acute pain points that challenge the existing businesses, the core businesses of these companies, as well as their growth stories. And these pain points both relate to internal tensions within the company, as well as conflicts within their customers' businesses. So it's both inside and outside. However, out of this kind of adversity comes opportunity, and we're already starting to see some new opportunity platforms emerging even today. Some obvious ones would be the move to remote working and the whole cascade of technologies to enable that. It's very obvious. We're living that every day. But we're also starting to see some interesting new virtual experiences being created, and we're certainly seeing a redefinition of industries like retail. The good news, if you're a large corporate, is that very few of your competitors, very few of the incumbents in any given industry have actually defined their innovation agenda for this new world. And second of all, and also very good news, there's actually never been a better time to invest in or launch a corporate venture capital fund. If you look historically back in Silicon Valley and beyond, actually, and look at some of the most impressive eras for venture capital investing, they tend to correlate pretty highly with systemic shocks. So post 9/11, 2008, and so on and so forth. If you're investing or setting up a corporate venture fund in that 12 to 18 month window after this shock, that's where the outsized returns will be realized. So my message to investors, as well as startups and corporates right now, is now is the time. Now is the time to act. And in fact, for those of you that are fans of Andreessen Horowitz, Marc Andreessen penned a very interesting essay a few months ago called "It's Time to Build," which was really very much a call to action on behalf of VCs and startups, reflecting the point that it's essentially a golden opportunity right now. But it's not all good news for corporates, right? The bad news for corporates is that Silicon Valley and other innovation ecosystems are out to eat your lunch. And if you're not feeling directly threatened today, you're certainly leaving a lot of money on the table looking at some of the startups that are being incubated as we speak. The corporate response to this situation, it's in the face of structural changes in their industries, and some of those changes will be permanent. We're now looking at companies recognizing that they need to find new ways to drive growth. And to do that, they need to significantly expand their opportunity horizon, often beyond their core business and into adjacent spaces. And this brings us to the topic of the day. Corporate venture capital is one of the best ways to do that, which is why we're seeing an increase in corporates setting up brand new CVCs or accelerating investment out of their existing platforms. In fact, back in Silicon Valley, which is where I've been for the last 30 years, at the early stage of the spectrum, I would say deal activity right now is as high velocity as I've seen it in a long time. So VCs are certainly aware that there's a golden opportunity right now. The other route to doing what I'm describing, developing new growth platforms, is venture building. So building new ventures inside of the corporate. We're not going to dwell on that today. But in both cases, the aim for the corporate is to build a pipeline of new growth platforms. That's what new ventures represent. And construct out of that pipeline a new portfolio of growth platforms for the business. So corporates know that they need to engage much more deeply with Silicon Valley and Shanghai and Tel Aviv and the other innovation ecosystems around the world. So the first thing I think is from the startups perspective to grasp is, what do corporates actually want from startups? There's a number of different objectives they may have, but there are really three most fundamental ones. The first thing they could be looking for is point solutions. They're looking for solutions to solve problems in their existing business. Prior to Mach49, I was president of Shell Ventures. I ran our operations in North America and China. And in point of fact, Shell Ventures was not one fund, it was 5. Each of the funds had different mandates. One of the funds was exclusively focused on the core exploration production portfolio, and would look to invest in startups that solve some very deep technical problems associated with exploration and production. So that's looking to partner with, invest in organizations that could address pain points in their core business. In other cases, however, companies may be looking to startups to help them accelerate a move into adjacent space, or in some cases provide on-ramps into that space. And again, I'll go back to Shell. Another one of Shell's funds was focused on what they call new energy. One of the newer divisions within Shell is called Shell New Energies. That's where all of the renewable activity is taking place, whether that's investing in startups, building new ventures, or doing M&A. So within Shell Ventures, we were regularly making investments into adjacent spaces such as solar, electric vehicles, hydrogen, things of that nature, all of which are intended to be accelerating Shell's move over the next 10 to 20 years into spaces that it needs to move to. As people are buying essentially less molecules, looking to buy more electrons, Shell needed to establish a platform in those spaces. And the third objective that corporates have, of course, is to stay current. They need to stay current on emerging trends, emerging technologies, and also emerging business models, because these inform their own R&D agendas as well as their own venture building objectives. So with that in mind, if you look at what are corporates actually doing, there's really three models out there that we see, and these are not new. We've seen them for a while. There's the model where corporates are just looking to be direct investors. Shell, I've mentioned already. Intel continues to be an aggressive investor in startups for exactly that reason, largely focused on innovations at the edge rather than the core. TDK, which we just helped launch into the CVC business a couple of months ago, is again focused on edge innovation. So these folks have largely an investment-driven mandate. They're looking to place small bets, they're looking to fail fast, and they're looking to maximize organizational learning. The other model, though, which is, I would argue, a little more interesting and a lot more relevant for you guys, particularly the startups out there, this is what I would call an accelerate model, where the objective of the corporate is not just to write checks, but actually also to become your customer, to provide expertise and to provide assets, leverage their assets essentially on your behalf. So great examples of that would be AT&T Foundry over in the Valley. Intel, again, also operates that model, and Goodyear that we recently partnered with. So, different models, different objectives, but essentially learning to discern what posture the corporates are actually taking to CVC would be really critical to partnering effectively with them. And I'll pause there.
Okay, great, Steve. Okay, before I move on to the second question, I just want to remind the audience that please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box in the Zoom session. Okay, so now moving on to my second question, and this one I would like to direct towards you, Andrew. As Steve has said, that the time is right now to start investing as well. So from an SME's perspective, how can SMEs charter new conversations with corporate and take cover from them within this in these disruptive times?
Thanks very much, and thanks, Steve. It's a very comprehensive overview with the CVC program. Just quick with the two companies that we mentioned, Search 365 and RoboBuy, just a very quick overview. They were established with one thing in common, is that we understand the challenges and pain the enterprise and government are struggling, on a daily basis, under the weight of increased information. And for them to have to make good quality, informed and risk-free decision. So, from our point of view, we figure out how to use AI technology, or what I think you call point solution based on some, fundamental technologies, and these algorithms to extract actionable insights, from all this information. So freeing out time, for the business and governments to manage their businesses bottom line, as well as in government and national security. So some of the examples that Search or RoboBuy, our client use are AI-based COVID-19 tracing, border surveillance, in the aspect of identifying supply chain risks or modern-day slavery. So I think that being the two companies, so you know what we do. As an SME, we believe that to have a successful conversation with the corporates, we have to learn how to engage with the corporate at their pain points or their trouble spots, like what you mentioned. And what we have is that we have learned how to leverage our AI disruptive components to provide them with the relief, the relief that has to happen fairly fast. So we try to spend a lot of time studying and understanding the corporates, not only at their challenges or the pain point, but also, at the point that, because most of the corporates are not sitting back, they are also transforming and changing and investing themselves. So we have to understand how to make ourselves relevant and at the same time have those conversations, identifying the targeting of our offering so that it's presented to them as, think of it as a medicine, to their problem, and it's not a vitamin or a candy, nice to have type of case where, time to the business benefit is pretty short and pretty fast. And that's the nature of how in SME we have to look into our business. I'll give you an example of one of these clients of ours. They are in the soft drinks industry. Now, in their case, they had trouble visualizing, their multinational spend data. They are across different languages, different currency, different location. If you talk to the management meeting, they really wouldn't have the clear visibility of where the spend is. What we've done is that we went to look into the spend and use the AI technology, identify, and collapsing, all the time in terms of where this spend is into a very short period, where now they can look into how they could, look into the spend trends. Now, in particularly, in the one unique case of their gas price, as we see that has been evolving has been fluctuating in the last 2 years. The CFO wants to know that, hey, when the price goes up, the vendors of the transportation company would come to us and knocking our door and renegotiate their contracts to increase in price. However, when the price of gas, drops or decline, guess what happened? They just kept very quiet. So, the C-level wants to know that, hey, we should be tracking in terms of the variations. But when those numbers that are across, half of the world, they would take, a long periods just to get that kind of information. So what we have done is we figure out how to use this technology to extract that information, what takes about 6 months into weeks. Now, we're saving them a lot of money because we demonstrated that time through their saving. Now we are also tracking their aluminum prices, their glass, their carbon dioxide, and sugar. And you could almost figure out which software company, soft drink company this is. So that's how the conversation is always have to be demonstrable results and really, time to collapsing, sort of time to saving. So that's the lessons we've learned. And those conversations, when it comes to bottom line performance, are always welcome in the corporate. Yeah. I hope that.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. Okay, so I'm just going to move on. And by the way, I'm quite happy to see we've got getting quite some interesting questions as well. So we'll address those once we go to the Q&A session. So going on to the next question, and the next one I want to ask from both of you, and if you can, one of you can, Steve, you can take on your corporate hat, and Andrew, you can take on your SMEs hat and respond accordingly. What are the nuances of doing business with corporate VC programs? Like, what is it that the corporates are looking for? You did touch upon some of the things, Steve, earlier in your response, but if you can just elaborate a little bit more. And then, Andrew, from you, how can SMEs navigate through them? So, Steve, would you like to go first?
Sure. And it's a great question because there's a real distinction, a very meaningful distinction between the conversation that you will have with a VC on Sand Hill Road, a financial VC, that's really operating with a pretty restricted set of metrics in terms of how they measure success for their investment versus a corporate venture capital fund. And it really comes down to, in the case of corporates, it comes down to understanding what are the gives and gets in this relationship if we leave the investment out of things for the minute. So, from the perspective of a corporate, Andrew will speak to what their, startups are expecting from corporates. I'll speak to what corporates are looking for from startups. And I have touched on some of these already, so I'll move fairly quickly. But one of the things to grasp is that, well, actually, before I get into that, you really need to, first of all, understand, is the investment being made with respect to driving innovation in the core of the business, or is it being made with an agenda to drive innovation at the edge? And one of the principal distinctions between the two is they're two very different sets of customers. If you're helping a large corporate drive innovation in the core, they already know who those customers are and they have relationships. They understand their customers' pain points very well. You may be accelerating solutions to market. You may be plugging in gaps in their product roadmaps, but you're really not bringing any additional insight to their customers. If, however, you're looking to receive investment from a company that's innovating at the edge, one of the principal things they'll be looking to you for is access and insight into new customers and new markets. That's really important. Related to that is innovation credibility. More often than not, you'll be bringing to the table some technical innovation, some business model innovation, which they don't have in-house or are not inclined to develop. And so your credibility in delivering that and being able to support it is super important. Learning is also, I mentioned this before, very important to them. Most corporate venture funds are explicitly managing institutional learning around the investments and the domains they're investing in. So having a contrarian point of view, again, if I go back to Shell, we would invest sometimes in startups as well as other funds, in part because they had a contrarian point of view about what the future is going to look like and the best way to get there. So never underestimate the value of a contrarian perspective. And then finally, talent. Very often the startups that we see on the corporate side have the kind of talent profiles that we wouldn't normally see. We certainly wouldn't have them in-house on the payroll. We may not be running into people with those profiles in the market either. So that talent is always critical for a corporate to be thinking about. Andrew?
Yeah, I will answer. I'll just sort of put my perspective from a startup. Looking at the startup in general, startup have a solution or an offering into the market. What they will be looking or seeking is really the market validations. Ideally, some friendly customer first, which is within the enterprise, and also to calibrate their offering. The ideal case, if they could seek, the CVC program with good quality connections into the industry, I think those programs, they can also take them into the market. I'll talk about an example or a case that we've done, because it is really important for the startup to have confidence in the quality of this experience that the mentor, this program, or the completeness of this program. Because with corporations, we know that naturally they would have a lot deeper and mature insight or detailed understanding of the pain points, a lot of like what you say, the institutional experience, but more than that, the learning, but also the memories that would benefit the startup. And this is an offering that is evident when I'll share with you the case we have. But also the last bit is when we do scale or operationalize it, when we start to look into some of the company to scale, the startup needs to really get help and also have access to the wider audience within that area. So within such a CVC program, such access to such a person would be extremely valuable. So when I was with Singtel, for example, when what we had was to bring forth, now the offering was just a mobile search and discovery, and that was bringing the innovations in terms of the the digital 3G, moving into the 4G now. With that, it was fortunate there was an innovation program where you can really jumpstart your learnings through the complexity and navigating through the complexity of the telecommunication industry, because for any startup, just to get their heads around or to gauge the customer maturity, that is what type of handset they have, what kind of user they have, the testing compatibility. The second point is the availability of this technology they have. When is it going to be ready? What is going to be ready? And lastly, integrating all that, the system readiness, where the billing and all that is going to plug in. For a small SME providing a small component or point solution to that, it would take them a year or maybe more to understand how to navigate within that that kind of environment. But these programs like this would help them to compress and focus on what they're good at. And then I think totally agree with you, for SME participating and really getting, a partnership with such a CVC, program is really brings benefit, more than just benefit. It really bring a lot of values to the kind of business in startup that we are in. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. So we've got some really pertinent questions in the Q&A box. I think we should just move towards the Q&A session. Mm-hmm. So I will just go ahead with the first question, and this one is for you, Steve. Is it normal for startups to seek the corporate investor, or is it the other way around? How do startups find the right corporate suitor? Is it through intermediaries or direct approach? What's your experience in this regard?
There are two conflicting schools of thought, and I've been on both sides of this argument, which probably suggests either I can't make my mind up or they're both equally valid. The financial VCs would normally tell you that the right time to go seek corporate backing is when you're close to the market and when you're getting ready to scale. Because from a startup's perspective, you're in a foot race basically with corporates, right? From the perspective of a startup, you have to believe that you can innovate faster than large corporates. On the other hand, once you have a solution that's really ready for market and you've established product market fit, corporates have a lot more ammunition in getting that solution into market. So there's a timing issue around when should you approach corporates for funding. However, I would argue also that's a little self-serving on behalf, or a little disingenuous actually on behalf of financial VCs. I've seen very successful models in which startups have partnered with corporates right from the get-go, usually when they have done an excellent job of identifying the pain point that they're addressing. It is highly relevant to the corporate, and the corporate in turn is structured in a way to really accelerate success for the startup. Probably the best I've seen, and it's for you to look at some point offline is AT&T Foundry. Very, very interesting Accelerate model they have. They're probably one of the most respected corporate venture platforms in the Valley. They would describe about $2 billion worth of commercial value to partnerships and startups over the last decade or so. And it's really a question of how they do the things I've described, uniquely identify pain points and get very, very focused on bringing value. So I think two ways to look at it. I would err on the side of build corporate relationships sooner rather than later, because that will be not only your best channel to market, but also your most likely acquirer, since most startups, unless they fail, of course, will be trade sales, not IPOs.
Okay. The next question is, what has been the experience of corporates in Singapore with respect to startup acquisitions, synergistic relationships, and CVC's investment or corporate VC investments? Any specific examples, either you, Steve, or Andrew, from a Singapore context?
Andrew, do you want to jump in first?
You can take that one. I think I just from our engagement so far, most of them are the enterprise company. A lot of them, what we've done is really more, the approach so far has been a partnership, for the companies we have. And because the nature of our proposition is really SaaS day one, born in the cloud, a lot of those engagement, we built on that partnership as the initial entry. And what have then turned out, for example, with the soft drink company that we have right now, we are a strategic partner, and we are looking to, go with them, covering globally with all their companies, all their branches.
Yeah, from my perspective, when I look at the Singaporean environment, the maturity of the corporate venture ecosystem here is, I'll be polite about it. It's still evolving. It's nowhere near as robust as what we might see, for example, in even Western Europe or Silicon Valley. So I'm not seeing a tremendous amount of venture building through partnership happening in Singapore. There's tremendous potential for that. The EDB recognizes that building a venture building ecosystem in Singapore is a high priority for the economy. Encouraging the CVC community to really get behind that is a part of the solution, but the other part is obviously internal venture building. I'd like to see a lot more activity, frankly, from our CVC friends.
Okay, fair enough. I've got another question for you, Andrew. What traits do startups need to look for ideal corporate partners?
What traits?
What traits do startups need to look for ideal corporate partners?
I guess I can really say for us, we're biased to more data-driven, evidence-based type of business, where it's in the big data space. So we were looking at a company or big corporate. We spend a lot of time understanding their pain point, what is innovations for them, what are their kind of spend, and then we filter through what are those corporate that's in that level of a category of maturity. Where we realize a few things is that if those issues that they have are not solved, then somebody's going to get into trouble, and we go in and highlight those very clear problems that they have.
Okay.
I guess.
Sorry. No. Please go ahead.
This is just one of those little things that, as a startup, you think of every way of getting access to listed companies. But one of the things we learn is. You can always get access in a listed company just by buying one share of their company and talk to the CFO.
Okay. Good.
Can I maybe
Yes,
throw in another perspective on that question? So I'll give you a very concrete example, again, back to Shell, which is just a recent experience. When startups were being enticed by Shell to become part of their ecosystem, one of the things that Shell would typically offer is what they called an implementation manager. This would be a member of the CVC staff that wasn't directly involved in the investment decision, but was highly involved in working with the startup post-investment to ensure that one or more pilots was successfully executed in the company. So one of the main reasons you should be looking to engage with a startup is because it gives you access either directly to customers or to an internal customer, essentially, which is what the pilots represent, so that you can fine-tune your solution. If that solution is simply thrown over the wall into a Fortune 7 company like Shell, it'll go nowhere. You need somebody managing that problem. It's not likely to be the investment team. So you need to satisfy yourself that somebody is advocating on your behalf. So I would ask the question of any CVC: do you have an implementation team post-investment who's managing this relationship? The short answer from many CVCs is nobody is, which is one of the reasons that CVCs can get a bad rap. Post deal, it's pretty variable what happens to the startup.
Okay. Okay. So follow up to that comment, we've got another very interesting question. And Steve, again, this is for you, and it's a little bit, I would say, really interesting question. Is that Steve mentioned that one of the reasons for corporates to look at CVC is staying current. In most cases, it is free corporate intelligence to understand what startups are doing, go to market, unique features, etc. How does a startup protect itself from such CVC programs, which are primarily intelligence masquerades?
Reputable CVCs, and for that matter, reputable venture capitalists, financial VCs, wouldn't dream of behaving in the way that you're implying here, for the simple reason that this is still a very trust-based business, right? You're really as good as your last deal, and your integrity is as good as your last engagement. So, again, putting my old hat on at Shell, wouldn't dream of treading into that minefield, for the simple reason there's an awful lot to come after if you were to decide to sue Shell. It's a very large target indeed. So ethics are really important. Integrity is really important. Corporate VCs are more inclined to sign NDAs than financial VCs, but I wouldn't rely on that. You should rely on the integrity and, frankly, the exposure of the corporate to any future lawsuits.
Great answer. Thank you, Steve, for that. The next one again is towards you. You seem to be a popular guy today in the session. How inclined are corporates to only partner with just vertical solutions? Example, Shell with oil and gas, AT&T with telecom, as opposed to cross-industry solutions?
Well, I think the question really comes down to where are they trying to go. Again, Shell investing in oil and gas, as well as BP does the same, and so do many others in the energy industry. But the core business is actually not where it's at, right? Oil and gas has been the engine that's pulled Shell for the last 120 years. The senior executives know full well that engine is not pulling Shell for the next 100 years. They need to go build that engine. That's what Shell's investments and commitment to new energies is all about. So commitments to wind power, to hydrogen power, to electric vehicles. All of these things represent really bets on the future. So you'll see more cross-industry investments happening in those corporates that are actually looking to make investments on the edge. I'll give you a concrete example, which is very different than oil and gas. So we recently worked with a family-owned business out of Europe called Pernod Ricard. For those of you that know Pernod Ricard, prolific provider of alcoholic beverages. They've been around for about 100 plus years. And they recognize that, just as yours is too, the world is changing. They're starting to feel the kind of disruptions that everybody else is. And they are too seeing opportunities to build new growth platforms. And those growth platforms for a drinks company are much, much further, afield than food and beverage, for example. So they're looking at new forms of entertainment. They're looking at social networks. They're looking at female empowerment, redefined experiences, post-materialistic luxury. I mean, they're thinking very broadly about where opportunities might lie, and they're looking to build a portfolio of ventures which actually provide them with routes into those markets. So I would argue that for a drinks company to be moving into hospitality, you might think of that as a line extension or an adjacency, but it's a very substantial shift of direction for a 100-year-old company. And we see this in CVC after CVC. A lot of the action is actually at the edge. The most acute pain for sure will be felt in the core, but if you believe that for many companies, they're not going back to the business they knew. That business is not dead, but it's transformed, and that transformation is permanent. There's a significant onus on finding new routes to growth, and that growth is highly likely to be in adjacent spaces.
Okay. Okay, so the one last question, and I would like both of you to please answer it as well, that because of this extraordinary COVID situation around the world, do you think it's the right time to start a new venture, both from a corporate side and an SME side? Steve,
to start a new business, or
to start a new venture?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that. I came to Singapore a year ago to build out the Asian business for Mac49. Our exclusive business is helping organizations create, build, and launch new ventures, and sometimes the same client helping them launch and operate corporate venture funds. We firmly believe that now is a superb time to be either building new ventures, making investments in new ventures, or starting and operating CVC. So I think the time is now. It's time to build.
Okay. From a startup perspective and SME perspective, Andrew?
I too agree with Steve. And, in our industry, just the very nature of the disruptive nature of the technology that is available to us, the artificial intelligence that we've been in, nothing beats right now is the best time where the nature of the disruptive technology allows us to enter many of the opportunity. And I think that COVID has really, if not just catalytically accelerate many of the opportunities. And you hear transformation in the last 4 years, but I think I've never seen Singapore transform or move as fast, trying to adopt and take into this, this sort of technology. So I think it's a prime time, it's a good time to participate and start these opportunities in this area.
Okay, so on that positive note, that COVID-19 has not only brought challenges, but it has also brought opportunities as well that startups and even corporates can capitalize on if they're smart about it. On that positive note, I'm going to thank everybody who has attended this session. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Steve. You've been great speakers, great answers. And with this, I'm going to hand it back to Siddhi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Atifa. Thank you, Steve and Andrew. This was an insightful and on time. Atifa, thank you for moderating this session to the T. We would be creating a podcast of it and sharing it with all. So thank you once again, Steve and Andrew and Atifa, for this insightful evening. And for folks who have joined us, thank you once again. Please join us back next Wednesday, same time, where we would be talking about urban solutions, opportunities in the data centers and urban parks in India. This will be in collaboration with Anthill and Enterprise Singapore. So please join in next week. Thank you all. Speak on Wednesday. Bye.